CJ Moto here with my EB48.4, and I just got an exciting new video series that I'm going to be bringing to y'all fresh off the presses. I'm going to try to make one video every day or two, and it's going to be talking about maintenance and tips and tricks for an 8-scale electric buggy. What's up, y'all? It's CJ Moto, and before I send this video off to the presses, I just wanted to explain a few things and also give a shout out. I want to give a shout out to Scottzilla RC. If you can check his channel out, it's pretty cool. He's got a lot of awesome 8-scale buggy footage, and he's real active on my channel, so I just wanted to give him a shout out. And then also Mark Santa Maria, check him out too. He's pretty cool. He's got lots of stuff. He's in Texas, so hopefully I'm going to get to meet him this weekend. His only downfall is he really likes working on Traxxas vehicles. I don't know what that's all about. But anyhow, he's cool though. Real cool. But it's actually the next morning from my shock building video. And I wanted to add, before I get into the shock building, I wanted to talk about some really important aspects of just kind of more tuning, but with your suspension. So on Tekno buggies, a lot of people run full droop. That's what I typically run. But anyhow, droop is basically, you use these set screws that are inside of your A-arms here. But one thing I want to cover, a lot of people might, or I know some people probably overlook this, it's very important. After you install your shocks, there's little dots on the top eyelet centered and bottom eyelet centered. So what you want to do is take these measurements with the dial calipers, okay, dot to dot. 119.21 on my dial calipers, and then you check the other side and it's exactly identical. I'm exactly in the same place. So you have got to have these identical to each other. And you also want to make sure your shocks are built to the same length, meaning that eyelet got threaded in the exact same amount of material threaded into it. And then also when you thread those bottom eyelets on your shocks, make sure the little ball that's down there moves freely. If it does not, then more than likely you threaded it too far and your shock shaft's pushing on that little ball through the rubber eyelet. Trying to think what else. Also, you can use your dial calipers if they have the inside portion like that to measure how far it is from the top of your shock to your bottom of your shock, or the top of your shock collar, that space. Shock collars, you know. If you've been locked up, you know what I'm talking about. But anyhow, so the other side, you want it to be even. It's not always gonna be, because the vehicle might not be identical weight bias, but it should be identical weight bias. So basically you should have the same, I've found that you should have pretty much the same amount of distance on either side. Then I also take a Dremel tool and mark a little hash mark on my shock collars, so that way when I'm turning them, I know that I'm turning them identical amounts of the way. So anyhow, hope y'all enjoyed that. Check out Scottzilla RC and Mark Santa Maria, and let's go over and check out the detailed shock building video for anybody that wants to see that. Thank you. All right, folks, tonight we're going to do us some shock maintenance. So let's see what we need. I got some all-purpose Atom Lube grease from Walmart that I use for pretty much dang near everything. Differentials, shocks, O-rings, all kinds of stuff. You definitely want to have your Tekno shock tool, both of these types, the one that holds all the shock parts and then the one that turns from the top. And then you want to have a 1.5 millimeter MIP driver, and obviously your shock fluid. I'm using 50 weight, which is 650 CST associated, and the new set of boots that I'm going to be putting on there is right here. So yeah, let's just get started and go ahead and do a quick shock tutorial this evening. Alright, so let's go ahead here and do some shock maintenance. So we'll take the shock cap off here with that Tekno shock cap wrench, and then also the pliers themselves. You want to get both of those tools for sure. They're awesome for this work. So thread the top off, and then we're going to go ahead and get rid of the silicone oil there, and we're going to be replacing it with 50 weight factory team associated, or 650 CST is the conversion for that. And now the next step is going to be to grab those shock shaft pliers attachment on these multiple application pliers from Tekno, And we're going to thread off the end there, the eyelet. And you'll see here in a second that I actually kind of did this in the wrong order, or not the best order to do it in. So I quickly realized here that I can't get that bottom section of the shock off. It's just on there too tight, because I like to really crank these things down. I've pretty much never had any shocks leak. Maybe one time. So what I end up doing here is threading the top back on, and then I'll tighten the top down, the shock cap, and then I'll hold the shock cap and the bottom. After I tighten down the shock cap, I'll move down and I'll hold that bottom section, and that'll allow me to get that bottom section off. And then I'll just go ahead and remove the cap. So I just definitely added a few extra minutes to the process, or maybe a minute. So now that bottom part's loose. And now I just go on up, get the cap loose. So now I have all of it loose. I'll go ahead and take all that off. And at that point I should be able to just go ahead and push the shock shaft right on through. It pops out. Now you want to make sure that you carefully remove all your O-rings. I just used the 1.5 millimeter MIP hex head to go ahead and remove everything. You've got a spacer in the center, 2 O-rings on either side, and then like 2 Delrin end caps on either side. So you got a grand total of 5 pieces in your shock bottoms down there. So definitely don't lose any of that. They give you some really nice stuff right out of the box. I did upgrade the shock shafts to the titanium nitride or tinitride coated shafts. I really don't think that it's necessary to do. It's just something I wanted to try. I've heard from a few different, well, I've heard from one person that I really turned to for a lot of advice with this stuff. He said that he's bent a few sets of the tinitride and he's never had any issues with the stock ones. So that's something to keep in mind. If you do want to upgrade, just be aware that they might be a little bit less strong for whatever reason. So now I'm just cleaning off everything, because I did indeed have little pieces of sand in there, just like I thought I would. And now I'm taking that all-purpose grease I got at Walmart. It's called Adam Lube. And it's actually, I think, made in Arkansas. Either Arkansas or Texas, and it's really good stuff. If you go to Walmart, you can get it. It's all-purpose grease, nano grease, called Adam Lube. So anyhow, I use that. I pack it around the O-rings and everything in the bottoms. I can't really use too much of it. You don't want to go too crazy. But when you slip the shaft back through, it pretty much takes care of all that anyhow. So cleaning everything out real good. Put a little bit of the grease around there. Some people put Loctite there. I crank it down so hard it's not coming loose no matter what I put on there. And I'm not going crazy with it. You don't want to strip any threads. These are all aluminum parts, but they are quite strong. So pretty snug is what I should say. I don't want anyone stripping parts on my behalf. So now we're just feeling all the parts with clean fingers, making sure there's no sand on there. Now I'm going to go over to the closet, get my manual. Don't ever be afraid to get your manual out and just refer to it. Anytime you have any question, I just wanted to make sure I was putting these spacers, these Delrin spacers back in right. I check every time. Even if I'm pretty sure I know, I'll always check to make sure. Because that one time that you do it wrong, you end up having a lot of issues, especially with something like a shock. You want to make sure it all goes back together exactly how it should. So just keep that in mind when you're doing maintenance. Just use the manual and pay attention to it. It doesn't matter if you've done it 100 times, just use the manual. So now we put that one spacer in, then an O-ring, and then the center spacer, another O-ring. I'm going to put the end cap on, put a little bit of grease on that. End cap on. And we can thread the very end on. Not tight. You don't want to tighten this down. You just thread it on lightly. Because you don't want those O-rings to expand at all. before you put the shock shaft in, or you can damage the O-rings. So once you got that done, you can go ahead. I was just cleaning out, inspecting, making sure there's no sand anywhere. Those are those one-way valves that I have. Aftermarket pistons made by VRP out of Texas. Put a little bit of oil on the shaft, make sure it doesn't snag anything when you slide it through the O-rings and the Delrin spacers. Got it through. Wipe off the end, get the excess oil off. And now we should be ready to go ahead and put our new shock boot on. Make sure we got the right size. We're working with our front shock, so it's going to be the shorter size. So we'll go ahead and slide a shock boot on there. Always make sure you slide the shock boot on before you put the eyelet back on, or else you just have to go ahead and take the eyelet back off. You will eventually do that, I promise. You will forget about that dang shock boot. Shock shaft pliers, a must have. Thread the eyelet back on. Snug it all the way down. After I'm done with this whole process, I always take a pair of digital micrometers. You've got to have digital micrometers for 8-scale buggy racing, or probably any RC serious racing. And I go ahead and extend the shock all the way, and I measure from end to end on my shock. And what I do is I make sure that the left and right shock match exactly. They're exactly the same thing down to the 0.01 of a millimeter. So that way you can make sure that you have equal droop on side to side. And your buggy's going to handle a lot better that way. So now I'm putting the top back on, so I have a locking point to go ahead and crank the bottom down. You want to do that now so you don't forget and you end up with oil leaking out of the bottom down there. So crank it down tight, nice and snug. Move up to the next one and loosen it. And now you can go ahead and take that off. And we're ready to go ahead and put our 50 weight associated shock oil in there. I love using associated shock oils. They're a little thicker than some of the other ones, but I prefer that personally, especially for the warm southern states. And then for my differentials, I do use PT racing oil, but that's because associated diff fluids run thick, very thick. So if you're tuning with people's setup sheets, it's not going to be accurate with associated unless that's what they were using. So now we go ahead and pump the shocks up and down, get those air bubbles out from underneath that piston. And now I've went ahead and got the top to the shock. While that shock sits there, you got to let that shock sit there and just let all those air bubbles work their way out. It takes 10 or 15 minutes. Just putting a little silicone on the small bleed screw on top of the shock cap to make sure I get everything off and re-lubricate that O-ring that's on there. So it looks good. I'm inspecting that little teeny tiny O-ring. Now I'm over at the sink. Magically just jumped on over there. And I'm just going ahead and I'm cleaning out with my little tire scrub brush that little hole that the set screw sits in the shock cap, because that can get dirt in it, and it will. That'll always get dirt in it. So a lot of the times I don't even bleed my shocks at the track because there's dirt up in there and I'm afraid of it getting in the shocks, but it just always ends up collected in that little Allen key head and around it. So make sure you really clean the top of that shock cap real good. Now we're back over here after we let it rest for a while. Make sure it's completely topped off with oil. We're going to thread the top back on, the cap back on. We're going to crank the cap down, nice and snug.
Last night she was like,
and then we're going to hold it at a 45-degree angle with that little hole, that bleeder hole up there at the top of the 45-degree angle. And we're going to slowly move it down. Down, down, down. Some oil's going to seep out slowly, slowly, slowly. And we're going to stop when it bottoms out completely. Now this is an emulsion style shock, so that means it has little air bubbles in it. So I'll show you. So how you get the air bubbles in there will happen in a minute. So we got it all the way down. Hold it down, and we put the shock cap screw in there and snug it down. You don't want to go over tight with these because you'll crush that little rubber O-ring. Doesn't take a whole lot to get these snug. And then once we snug it down, we're going to pump the shock. And we're going to pump it at least 25 to 30 times. And like I said, it's an emulsion shock, so it has those little bubbles in it. So that's what you're doing right here, is creating thousands and thousands of little bubbles in the shock. So you're getting it to where it'll be when it's on the track. And then what you're going to do after you pump it a bunch of times is you're going to pull the shaft all the way down. That's important. Make sure it's all the way down. Take that set screw back out, and you're going to do that same process one more time. But now more oil is going to come out because you have all those micro bubbles in there. And after this step's complete, I'm going to put the set screw back in. This step you want to really take your time, and I just kind of wipe the oil off as I go. Wipe it off, wipe it off, wipe it off. Slowly go down with it. This all takes a lot of patience. Now we're all the way down and locked, and we hold it there. And go ahead and put that screw back in. And once that screws back in, we'll snug it down. Just lightly snug it down. I've seen people strip that screw before. That's no fun. I've seen people break that screw before at the track, actually. So now we're done with that part. We got our spring. It looks good. Slip it back over our boot. Pull the boot up. Put the end collar on. Take the teeny little dowel rod screw, or whatever you want to call it. Double-ended Allen screw. And go ahead and we're going to thread that back in. And after this, our shock, one of our front shocks is going to be complete. And that's how you rebuild a Tekno EB48.4 shock. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching. CJ Moto out.